Welcome to Live Without Limits. Transform your thinking, redesign your life. I'm your host, David Ashinsky, and today we explore how to better understand ourselves, heal old wounds, and create lives filled with more awareness and intention. And today's show is titled Triggered: Understanding Your Emotional Reactions and Taking Back Control. Today, we're doing something that every single one of us experiences, but few of us really talk about openly, and that's emotional triggers. Those moments when a small comment, a situation, or even a tone of voice suddenly sparks a strong emotional reaction within you, sometimes stronger than even you expected. Maybe someone cancels plans, or you feel an intense wave of rejection. Maybe you receive feedback at work, or you immediately feel defensive or ashamed. Or maybe a loved one says something harmless, but it touches an old wound, and suddenly you're spiraling. Triggers are completely normal. They don't mean that you're weak. They don't mean that you're broken. They're simply your nervous system's way of alerting you to unresolved emotions and experiences that still need care. And the beautiful thing is, once you start understanding your triggers, you can move from reacting automatically to responding intentionally. You can create space between what happens to you and how you choose to move forward. This isn't about blaming yourselves for feeling triggered. It's about becoming more compassionate with yourself. New tools to navigate these moments with greater peace and strength. So today, we're going to explore why emotional triggers really are, why they impact us the way they do, and most importantly, how to start taking your power back when you feel triggered. You're in the right place. So let's dive in gently and together. And be, before I go any further, what I'd like to do is kind of get into some stories that may help you understand exactly why you react the way you do. Now, let's start by getting really clear on what emotional triggers actually are. An emotional trigger is anything, an event, a word, a situation that stirs up a strong emotional response inside you, often far bigger than what's happening in the present moment. It's that flash of anger, sadness, fear, and shame that feels almost autonomic, like your body and emotions are reacting before your mind even has time to process what's going on. And here's the important part: triggers are almost always tied to past experiences. They're not just about what's happening right now. They're about old wounds that haven't fully healed. Some of the most common sources of emotional triggers include childhood wounds. Maybe you grew up feeling unseen, unheard, or criticized, and now any small sign of rejection or judgment hits that same old nerve. Past traumas, experiences of loss, betrayal, abuse, or neglect can leave lasting imprints on the nervous system, making certain situations feel threatening even when they're not. Unresolved conflicts. If something important was never fully addressed or healed, whether with a parent, a partner, or a friend, similar situations can reawaken all these buried emotions, unmet needs, when core emotional needs like love, safety, acceptance, or respect were not more consistently, the yearning for those needs and the fear of not getting them can get triggered very easily. Now, what I want to do is give you a little bit about that last one, unmet needs, that I grew up in a home that was very, very toxic. I had two parents that came from abusive environments, and both of them got together and they created the same toxic environment of abuse and negativity. And when you have children with disabilities, they more than anything need to know that they're loved, that they're respected for who they are. And in many ways, I never experienced that. What I did experience was a lot of physical abuse and a lot of verbal and emotional abuse. And for a lot of reasons, that was my comfort zone because that was the environment I grew up in. And I knew there was no way that as an adult I wanted to live in that same kind of environment. Plus, I grew up in an era when society did not even recognize its disability community as existing or even try to accommodate its disability community. And I know there's a lot of times that I will feel sadness because I would love to have shared my life with someone. But knowing the times and the environment I grew up in and the fact that I was protecting myself, I've lived a fulfilled life, but I've never been able to, I've never had anyone that I could truly share it with. And I'm still involved in a toxic environment to an extent, in that my sister controls all the assets, and yet she is very much like my mother in how she treats her own sisters because she felt a lot of resentment towards them, and my mother allowed her to get away with her bad behavior, and so no one has ever held her accountable. So she therefore thinks she can continue to do it. And then so we have to understand just how what happens to us early on in life affects who we are as adults. And understanding that is the most important thing that can help you face up to what you're feeling, where your emotions are, and how you have to change them. So, when you find yourself feeling triggered, it's not just about being too sensitive or overreacting. It's about your nervous system responding to old pain that was never fully seen, felt, or soothed. And I want you to hear this clearly. Having emotional triggers does not make you weak. It does not mean that you're broken. It simply means that you're human and that there are parts of you still asking for healing, care, and attention. I remember many, many, many years ago, I had basically isolated myself from my family because they were so toxic. And my mother was worried about me, so she got in touch with someone that she knew me to get in touch with me. And then I wrote her a letter telling her how I felt about what happened. And she said to me, "How could you say those things? If that's what I truly felt, that's what I said to her." She didn't want to acknowledge that she was abusive because she didn't understand. And whenever she would watch shows where they would talk about abuse and how could she, it's like she couldn't understand how people can react that way or feel that way, because her way of dealing with stress or something that she didn't know how to cope with is to put her head in the sand and pretend it didn't exist. And if it doesn't exist in her mind, then it doesn't exist. But in reality, all of those issues still exist. And if someone tells you how they're feeling, acknowledge it and understand where it's coming from and be willing to change. Be willing to make changes in that relationship or have no relationship with that person. Because I knew my mother was not the type of person to change. She expected you to allow her to continue abusing you and take it. For many years, her solution for me as I struggled to build a business was, "Oh, you can come live at home." Well, coming living at home was meaning taking her abuse. I was better off on the street than being in that situation. And I remember being 12 years old. And after many, many times of being disciplined, just simply because I was the one that had to be the one that caused it all, and because my younger sister got away with the things she got away with, and I got blamed for it. I remember being that 12-year-old kid that climbed out of the window and wanted to run away but didn't have anywhere to go. Today it's different because you got laws protecting children against child abuse. But that at that time, it was always looked at, if that child is being disciplined, there's got to be something wrong with them. And yet, you don't realize just how, when you come from a hostile environment, it creates hostility in that child, and they become hostile adults. If you're willing to approach your triggers with curiosity rather than shame, they can become powerful doorways into deeper healing and self-understanding. Today is all about learning how to walk through those doorways gently, consciously, and with so much compassion for yourself. And what we'll explore is how emotional triggers shape our reaction and why sometimes our responses can feel so much bigger than the moment itself. So now let's get into how emotional triggers impact reactions. Now, we understand what emotional triggers are and where they come from. Let's talk about what actually happens when you get triggered. They don't usually give us time to think, reflect, or analyze the situation calmly. They send us straight into emotional reactivity, a fast, powerful surge of emotion that feels immediate and overwhelming. Why does this happen? Because your brain is wired to prioritize emotional survival over logical reasoning. When something reminds you, even slightly, of a past hurt or threat, your nervous system can react as if the danger is happening right now. And typically, these reactions show up in three major ways. You fight, you might feel a rush of anger or become defensive. You might snap back, argue, or try to protect yourself by pushing against the person or situation. It's your system trying to fight off what feels like a threat. Flight. You might shut down emotionally or withdraw. Maybe you ghost someone, cancel plans, or emotionally check out of a conversation. This is your system trying to escape and perceive danger. Freeze. So you've got fight, flight, and freeze. You might feel stuck, overwhelmed, or unable to respond at all. Maybe your mind goes blank or your body feels frozen. This is your system going into shutdown mode, hoping that the threat just passes by. So remember, it's autonomically in your system that if you feel a threat, immediately you're going to try and fight, or you're going to flight, or you're going to freeze. And these things are the three things that are innate in everyone in how we react to threats to our life. So let's bring it to life with a couple of simple examples. Imagine someone cancels plans with you at the last minute. Logically, you might know they're busy or had an emergency, but emotionally, if you have a wound around feeling abandoned or rejected, you might suddenly feel hurt, angry, or completely shut down, as if you've been left behind all over again. Or think about receiving feedback at work or school. The words might be constructive and helpful, but if you carry old wounds around, criticism, maybe from a hypocritical parent, or past failures, you might immediately feel attacked, humiliated, or ashamed. In both cases, the reaction isn't really about the present moment. It's about old pain being reactivated by a current situation. And here's why this matters. When we react purely from the triggered place, we often respond in ways we later regret, ways that hurt relationships, limit our growth, or make us feel even worse about ourselves. But when we can recognize, oh, I'm feeling triggered right now, we create an opportunity to pause, to understand ourselves better, and to choose a response that grounded in the present, not trapped in the past. How to recognize when you're triggered. Now, that we understand how emotional triggers send us straight into reaction mode, let's talk about something really important. How do you actually know when you're triggered? Because sometimes it's obvious. You feel a big emotional wave and you know something has been stirred up. But other times, the signs are more subtle, and the sooner you can recognize them, the more power you have to pause and choose a different response. So here are a few key signs. Physical sign. Your body often reacts before your mind even catches up. You might notice a racing heart, that sudden adrenaline rush, tension in your jaw, shoulders or stomach, shallow breathing, feeling like you can't quite catch your breath. Your body is trying to prepare you for a perceived threat, even if the threat isn't actually real in the present moment. Emotional signs. You might feel a sudden surge of strong emotions like anger, wanting to lash out and defend yourself, sadness, a deep, heavy feeling that feels out of proportion to the situation, fear, anxiety, dread, or panic rising up fast, shame, that awful feeling and sinking feeling that you are bad or not enough. These emotions often come fast and hard, much faster than when you're simply reacting to everyday inconvenience. And I can tell you this, when you grow up in a toxic family where there's a lot of abuse, your emotional signs seem to come out much more easily be, because it triggers those old feelings and those old emotions. Always remember, you have to learn to deal with it, face it up front, and then get beyond it. Your thoughts might shift dramatically when you're triggered. You might notice catastrophizing, jumping to worst case scenario immediately, black and white thinking, seeing things in extremes. This is a disaster, or they must hate me. Self-judgment, harsh, critical thoughts toward yourself. I'm so stupid. Or why can't I get it right? These mental patterns can escalate the emotional wave and make you feel even more overwhelmed. Recognizing the signs, physical, emotional, and mental, is incredibly powerful because awareness is the very first step to changing your routine. You can't change what you can't see. But once you notice that you've triggered, even if it's after the fact, at first, you can start building a new habit. A habit pausing, a habit of breathing, a habit of choosing to respond from your present self, not your wounded past. You don't have to be perfect at this. Awareness alone is growth. Every time you catch yourself in a triggered state and approach with curiosity instead of judgment, you are healing. You are retraining your mind, your emotions, and your body to move through life with more freedom and choice. Up next, we'll go into and dive into something strategies that you can use in the moment when you realize you're triggered so that you can regain control and stay grounded even when emotions run high. So now we're going to get into some strategies for managing triggers. Now that we know how to recognize when we're triggered, let's talk about what to do in these moments, because being triggered isn't something you can always prevent. You can learn, manage your reactions so they don't control you. And here are 5 strategies that you can start practicing today. Pause and breathe. The very first and often most powerful step is simply to pause. When you feel the emotional surge coming on, stop. Take a few slow, deep breaths. Breathing deeply tells you that your nervous system, I'm safe. I don't need to react impulsively. It creates just enough space between the trigger and the reaction so that you can choose what to do next instead of being swept away by emotions. Name your feeling as you breathe. Try to name the emotion that you're experiencing. Is it anger, sadness, fear, shame? When you came to the feeling, or rather, when you name the feeling, you bring it into your conscious awareness and you take away some of the power to hijack your behavior. You're reminding yourself, I'm having a feeling, but I am not the feeling. Self-soothing techniques. Once you've named the feeling, it's important to self-soothe. Like patting yourself on the back. This can include grounding exercises like feeling your feet firmly on the floor or placing your hand over your heart. Positive self-talk like it's okay to feel this. I'm safe right now. Body awareness. Practices like soothing and stretching or gently shaking out tension to release the stress from your body. Self-soothing isn't about ignoring your emotions. It's about helping you and your body and mind return to a state where you can think clearly again. Get curious. Once you feel a little more grounded, gently ask yourself, what past experience might this be reminding me of? Triggers often aren't about the present situation, like the echoes of old pain. Maybe a canceled plan reminds you to bring of being abandoned as a child. Maybe critical feedback reminds you of being judged harshly in the past. When you get curious about the root of your reaction, you create even more compassion for yourself and you start to, to heal at the source. More compassion for yourself. Respond, don't react. Finally, once you've passed or paused, named the feeling, soothed yourself, and gotten curious, you're ready to respond. A response is thoughtful, it's intentional, it comes from your present self, not your wounded past. Maybe you calmly express your feelings. Maybe you decide to take a break and revisit the conversation later. Maybe you realize it's not even worth engaging and you choose peace. Whatever your response is, the key is that you're choosing it, not being dragged along by a knee jerk emotional reaction. These strategies take practice. They're not about perfection. They're not a, or they're about progress. Every time you see and you use one of these tools, you're strengthening a new, healthier emotional muscle. In the final part of today's episode, we'll talk about why every moment you practice managing your triggers is a moment of reclaiming your power and how small shifts lead to big transformations over time. As we wrap up today's conversation, I want to leave you with this powerful reminder. Triggers are not something to fear. They're invitations to heal. They show us where our hurts are still tender. They reveal where old stories still live. And most importantly, they offer us a choice. We can either react from old wounds or respond from new awareness. Every single time we recognize a trigger, pause, breathe, or choose a different response, you reclaim your power over your life. You are no longer a prisoner or to past experiences. You are actively creating a new way of being. One conscious, compassionate moment at a time. So, this week I invite you to practice simply noticing. Notice when you feel triggered. Notice the stories that come up. Notice the physical sensations, that emotions, the old echoes. And most importantly, meet it all with compassion and judgment. You don't have to fix everything at once. You don't have to heal overnight. Healing happens one breath at a time, one act of courage at a time, one conscious moment at a time. You're doing beautiful work, even when it feels messy, even when it feels hard. So now I want to thank you so much for being with me today. If you found value in this episode, I'd love for you to share it with someone who might need this reminder too. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so we can keep growing together. Until next time, take a deep breath, trust your journey, and know that you are stronger and wiser than you think.